This is True Multifamily, the show where we dive in on what really happens after closing a multifamily property. We're going to expose the role of asset manager. That's the person who has the responsibility of seeing the vision, executing the plan, and managing people, budgets, and timelines, all to deliver returns for our investors. These are the real struggles, the real victories, and the real stories of asset management.
Welcome back to another episode of True Multifamily. I'm your host, Justin Fraser, here today. Super special guest, Mr. Ken Van Liew. Ken, how are you today?
I'm doing incredible, Justin. Just another wonderful day.
I'm so excited that you're on the show. We were just talking beforehand. We've got a Jersey connection. We know a lot of the same people. So I'm so glad that we were able to connect here today.
Yes. Jersey. It's a small world, my brother.
So, Ken, let's not waste any time. Tell our audience about you and about just some of the incredible things that you've done in the past year.
Sure. You know, I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed. I created the 6-year plan in college, and after wanting to be an engineer, I earned a degree. I became a civil engineer, and in that process, I won a development award, and it planted the seed for real estate development. So after doing civil engineering for about a year, you know, I went into real estate development. And, you know, maybe before I dive into career, I just tell you, you know, I've been married to the same person for 38 years. I have 3 wonderful children. I'm CEO of Global Real Estate Strategies and author of the Modern Wealth Building Formula, How to Master Real Estate Investing. And I dove right in. You know, you may hear the story a lot of times. Your parents tell you to go to college and do all that kind of good stuff. And, you know, I followed their route. And next thing you know, I really didn't know what I was doing, and studied civil engineering, planted that seed, as I mentioned. And fast forward years later, you know, I was standing on top of a skyscraper that I built in New York City, looking out, saying, wow, you know, I wonder if I could ever get into real estate. I had, you know, mastered construction. And I decided to go back to school at night and get a master's on learning how to finance them, because that award I won showed me how to subdivide land and do all the civil engineering. And then I'm standing on top of this 35-story building, looking out at Manhattan, going, wow, you know, if I could just get into real estate, if I could learn how to finance these things, I'll do something one day. And fast forward, you know, in 97, I opened up a company because I always believed, you know, open up a bank account to receive the money, and maybe one day it'll land in there, you know. And in 97, I opened up this company, and I started to think about it. I couldn't sleep a lot of nights because I started thinking about 9 ways how to earn fees, which I write about in my book. And about 2 years later, I was like, you know, if I could just do a $10 million project, I could pay myself like a 5% development fee and a 3% CM fee, and I could run 10% general conditions, and my finance guy could take a little fee. And if I do property management, I can get a little bit of that. I'm like, this development business might be pretty good on a $10 million project. I could throw $2 million in my pocket. So sure enough, 2 years later, I get hold of this property for like $25,000. And next thing you know, I'm developing a $17 million project using other people's experience and other people's money. And that's kind of how it started in like a bunch of different directions, you know?
Wow. That's, oh my God. All right. We have to break this down. I know we don't have time for it, but give me a little bit of an overview on the skyscraper development in Manhattan. Just how does that even work? I'm just so curious about that process.
Yeah, you know, it's a long process, and, you know, to build a skyscraper from start, you know, when you have this idea, it takes about 3 years. Now, the good thing in New York, you can never have like zoning boards and planning board meetings that you may have heard of. You know, obviously when you're doing multifamily, you got to go in and get approvals, because there's just enough red tape. To get a permit in New York City, you have to hire someone to go wait in line like a deli and get a ticket, you know? Yeah. So the key is you know what you can build where, and it's simplified in the sense that if you have a 100 by 100 lot and you have an FAR of 10, you could build 100,000 square feet on that property. You're not going to get any zoning changes unless you're going to like restore the subway next door, and then they'll consider it. And we do get, you know, some what they call is a little bit of bonus FAR, where you could throw an extra penthouse, which brings, you know, an extra few $1 million into our pockets. But when you do those deals, you have a criteria just like any other deal. You know, right now it's like around 1.3, you know, so if you put a, you know, $1 million in, you want to get like $1.3 million out, right? So that means you can syndicate it. And over 3 years, if you whack that in 3, you're dealing with around a 30% rate of return, which, you know, is an investment criteria, which allows you to syndicate, which, you know, is kind of what you do in the multifamily, you know, in business and asset management. and no, and it's a lot the same. And what I joke about is, what I learned is building a skyscraper is kind of just keep building 30 houses on top of each other. You're starting a cycle. And, the front end of like getting approvals, is similar, like, to going, and if you're building a house, and the closeout, the facilitation of the investment is the same. And what's the difference is the middle part. It's just a lot longer and very, very repetitive. If that gives you a little bit of flavor on, the skyscraper, idea.
Yeah. Thank you. That it's so foreign to me, but sounds exciting. And Ken, what's one thing that if someone asked you, what's one thing that would surprise me about skyscraper development in New York?
Yeah. The one thing about skyscraper development is, the impact on the adjacent buildings. There was a building that I did, and when you start to dig these deep holes, you're running the risk of disturbing other buildings alongside. And we always take precautions. And it was this one foundation I did. It was called the Secant Foundation, where you literally drill these caissons down 30 feet to rock, create a bathtub, and then dig the bathtub out.
Okay.
And what happened was, as we were doing this, the building started to lean. Now, before we start these processes, we put these things called telltales on all the adjacent buildings, and we set up automated surveying instruments. So you could literally in real time see what's happening with the buildings. And, one day this alarm starts going off, and the building started to lean, and it went through a whole thing. So, I mean, the impact on the neighbors, you'd be surprised just on if the one thing is how much effort you have to put into being a good neighbor in New York City, right? and have a little fun about it,
Wow. Well, cool. Thank you. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah, the Leaning Tower of 29th Street it was almost the Leaning Tower of pizza. It went to 8.5 inches, and they were about ready to evacuate the building when it'll be another day, another story, another show on how we ultimately had rakers put in place, steel rakers, to stop that, until we were able to inject like concrete volleyballs underneath the foundation to make the soil more dense. It was really interesting, and an engineering phenomena,
Wow.
at the end.
Wow. What? Oh, geez. I can't even imagine just the pressure to make sure you're not falling, your building's not falling on your neighbors. And
yeah, I said that there goes going to go my license after this one. I was like,
wow. But, okay. So I know you want to get into this story about assisted living, right? So tell us just how'd you go from skyscrapers to assisted living, and set this up for us a little bit.
Yeah. And I think, and I'll try to hit it from a couple of different contexts, because, with you being, involved in multifamily, and us knowing some brothers out there, that do some similar things, we want to give some value, and one of the things that I got involved early in my career was in assisted living. And it was like a multifamily project, in the sense that, the management aspect of it was something that was key. And, on your assets, you don't put all your eggs in one basket with your property managers. You want to diversify in case there's an issue. So there was a whole property management conversation. There was some asset management conversation stuff. There was some critical mass conversations, because I only owned one assisted living. Who does business development? Who's the relationship manager in that industry? So it became pretty fascinating. But I'll tell you the story about the assisted living. I had this dream, and, I wanted to go into development, as I was telling you, because the fee story was keeping me up late, and had a chance to play at this golf club for an outing. I felt guilty because I couldn't afford to join a country club. But during that round, I started daydreaming, like, what if I could join a country club? And at the end of that round, I asked my wife if I could take some money out of the account, because I felt that proximity was power. Mm-hmm. And if I could get myself around people that I believe power, could have been a little punch drunk back then, just, thinking like money was more than it was. Because, we realized money's green. It does what it does, but there's a lot of other components to be successful. Money's one component of it. But I had this proximity is power thing. And at the end of that round, I ended up joining that country club and raising $1.7 million to build the assisted living. So the proximity power thing theory made,
great tip.
Paid off.
Yeah.
But the assisted living process worked out well, and how, I could get some tidbits is when I first started that, I was like, wow, assisted living, how am I going to manage this? So if you were in the case and I got to get a property manager, I was like, well, who manages assisted living? And I come to find out one of our competitors, but in the Southern Jersey area, Meridian Healthcare Systems, was going to come in and manage the property. Now, like anything, and maybe in some of your businesses, we're always concerned about who's going to stay on the field, because people have a tendency to step off the field, get in stands and watch the game, right? But we want people entrenched and committed to the project, right? So how do you do that? You incentivize them with some ownership, right? So in our case, with this entity coming in to manage our assisted living, we incentivize them with some ownership. And as we went down the line, we realized, wow, we're in the assisted living business, but we don't really have like a director of marketing and a director of business development. And we don't have that relationship manager to build, more assisted livings. And, eventually after doing my second one, I decided to move into more multifamily ground up development. But that's a little bit what I got out that may open up some questions for you and see how we can give some more value to the listeners, Justin?
Yeah, absolutely. So many places to go, but just so were you developing this assisted living facility?
I was. I was fortunate to lock it up with a $25,000 refundable deposit. And then I went into a 3-tranche raise, and we ended up developing that and cutting the ribbon, about 13 months after getting approval.
Wow. Very good. And so what is your plan? Assisted living is not something, I know a lot of people are into it right now. It's something that is becoming popular. Multifamily investors are, maybe going into that space. So just talk us through the process of building it and filling it and staffing it, and just what do we need to know if we want to get into that business?
Yeah. I'm going to broaden it right up for you, because I'm going to give you the context of kind of the assisted living, which is, believe it or not, when I did it 20 years ago, the demographics were pointing in the direction that are actually screaming right now. So there's a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of conversation about converting hotels that are struggling into assisted living. And, as far as putting it all together, and maybe we could segue a little bit into what I realized and what I was doing on that assisted living facility was using the modern wealth building formula and building it using other people's experience and other people's money. Where today, even if you're in the business of real estate, you could take that clue, because success leaves clues, and expand your business with that theory, let alone if you're getting started, use the theory to get started, and I think maybe that's where the listeners but I'm willing to go in any different direction.
Let's dive right into it. I'd love to hear about it. And we absolutely, we're going to save about 5-10 minutes at the end and talk about the book as well. For sure.
Yeah. So the assisted living, just to, keep everything in perspective. And I always like to keep it simple, silly, if you can, is, the assisted living process and any type of real estate, the way that I look at it, it may just be my view, change your view, change your life, is how I look at it. Is assisted living is almost like any type of development. There's just a health component into it, and it's just another variable in the equation or a risk factor, right? Now, the beauty of the assisted living now is that we have a feeder system, right? Because people are getting a little older, and the assisted living is needed, and it's actually relatively convenient. I've, now not only developed a few assisted living, but, my parents are in an assisted living, and they're in an assisted living because it's built comfort in my heart. And, it's a way, when you get to that age, it gives a little assistance to them. It doesn't take away living. At my father's assisted living, there's a putting green, there's a bocce ball court. They have their own car, and today, with things going on, and, I want the normal to come back. I don't want the new normal. People are taking these options, and creating, a healthy senior living atmosphere. And people not only could develop assisted living, they can hire, 55 and above living, and then have what they call as a continuing care community, where they can go from senior living into assisted living, and then you can have long-term care. And the opportunities are across the board. And, I'm out looking into what everybody else is looking in, but, and then it comes down to creating your unique heroic identity and your gravitational pull, because when there's competition, those are the items that are going to help, the cream rise to the top.
So I love that phrase, your unique heroic identity. Tell us about yours.
Yeah. Well, my unique heroic identity is, I've been blessed to be able to build some skyscrapers, but I truly think my unique heroic identity is identifying what's truly important to people and what they care about. And in that process, leave them with more power, freedom, and self-expression and peace of mind. And with the ultimate result of bringing them to their greatness. And, that's what it's all about. That's my why.
Wow. You're a giver, it's so educational. Thank you for sharing all of that. Where and how do you start thinking about writing a book? Tell us about that process a little bit.
Yeah, it wasn't easy for me. I look back at some of my writings when I was in high school. My dad, he used to say some interesting things like, Kenneth, I never really understood what you wrote on a piece of paper, but you did turn into a pretty good writer. But, I was one of those guys where I guess you could say I had, back in the day, a little bit of ADD, where I have a lot of stuff in my mind. So things were circling, but I mirror and match people. So I found someone who was a best-selling author, and I said, how do you start a book? And he said, it starts out with all your big ideas. And I had a lot of big ideas, and I literally spent one of those brainstorm sessions just writing down all my big ideas. And it was far-fetched, and from that I derived a table of contents of 11 chapters on what I wanted to write about. And it was constantly in what should I say, in progress and evolving. So, I had preliminary chapters, and then this guy said to me, and when you get that, he says, for each one of those chapters, write down 3 questions that you want to answer to the person that's going to read it in that chapter. And I literally took that format, and the hardest part was staying in one chapter at a time. So I literally went around my house and I put different color pieces of paper. I'd have pink, bright orange, green, and each one had the chapter title. And when I would think about stuff that was going to go in a different chapter, as I was walking around my house, I would write it down on that specific paper for that chapter, which would keep me focused on the one chapter. And there were some chapters, on the average, it came out to 1 chapter a month because I wasn't a great writer. And some chapters would come out of me in a week. Another one would take 2 months. So it came out as an average of 1. And then at the end, I had like 2 proofreaders. I had a proofreader and then like a professional author read it. And then eventually it kind of got to a manuscript. And then I called someone who was a 9-time #1 international bestseller, because I figured success leaves clues.
Mm-hmm.
And I said to her, Divya, how'd you become a 9-time #1 bestselling author? She goes, well, I could show you how to do it. And, I paid her a little money at that time. And she helped me figure out, because I didn't know how to set it up like on KDP, because I missed the whole part. You got to figure out, do you want to self-publish, go to a big publisher? In today's world, if you want to eliminate friction and have a book like within 1 year, you'd have to self-publish. So she showed me how to set up the KDP and the Amazon. And thank God, it hit #1 in 29 categories in 4 different countries. And, it wasn't a New York Times bestseller, but, it did get some accolades, and I get to pay it forward. So that's what it really came down to.
Well, that's a pretty cool insight into that production process and writing. I love the Post-it notes all around your house. So let's get into the content. Give us a quick summary and really, who is this book for, and what do you want, the reader to get out of it?
Yeah. So great question. So the modern wealth building formula is a find, fund, and facilitate system that you can blanket on any type of real estate. So when I first started it, I did it on my assisted living, and then I tried it out on a skyscraper that I did at 240 Park Avenue. And then we did some commercial acquisitions, and then we proved it out in residential wholesale and fixing and flipping, where we did 137 deals in 1 year. I was CEO of a company called Flipping NJ, and we really blew it out in 8 different counties and just had a great time. But it has a little twist to it just because of my heart with Tony Robbins, another partner of mine, Sean Callaghy from Unblinded Mastery. And, with the self-development and the 3 components, the 4 components of the modern wealth building formula and how it really came about. I had this, one of those days I was a little scrambled. I had a bunch of words going around in my head. I would always, Tony Robbins was always true to my heart, and I was all about massive action, and like the M came to mind. And I literally had just finished a course with Landmark Education. It was on wisdom, and the W came to mind. And the next thing I've always been a leader. I'm talking about leadership, but I said, I'm going to be a bold leader, and the B, modern wealth building. And then the F came from just forward thinking. I'm like a disagreeable giver sometimes, like where I just, I like to disrupt. I have a certain way that I think is going to work. And when those letters were scrambling around, like I said, modern wealth building formula. And, and after I wrote the book, I was like, wow, this thing it's how I mastered real estate investing, but it really applies to every business, because every business, you have to find a business, you have to fund a business, you have to facilitate a business, you have to use what I call the unblinded mastery formula. That's what Sean Callaghy created. The formula of bringing more magic, time, and money into people's lives, and using the 10 indispensable elements that he talks about, which starts with love, and level 5 listening, and really understanding what people want, and validation and acknowledgement, and and just getting down to business. It's really all about integrity-based human influence, because when you have integrity-based human influence, you're not taking advantage of people. You're not selling people, right? They want to merge ecosystems with you to create a better place. And when you come from a place where you give more value in your ecosystem than you're taking, everybody benefits. Everybody benefits.
Absolutely. Could not agree more. So can you give us let's end with sort of one piece of advice that we have not covered from the book that you think can be most powerful to our audience, people that are building businesses, that are operating, trying to buy apartments or run apartments effectively. Give us some practical and blow our minds, will you?
Yeah. The book, I think, I learned this through Tony Robbins. The book, helps, and it's a little related to sports. So if I were to say, everybody needs a little bit of a pre-game warm-up, which could lead to a bit of a paradigm shift. And, what that happens is, in the book, I bring you through what's called as a mindset acuity exercise, because I believe that there's a lot of things that we don't see that are right in front of us. And the first aspect is to open you up to something that you may not see. So it opens you up to a new view and a new listening. Once you have a new view and listening, and you reestablish what your investment criteria and what the context of your investment criteria is, because when you look at my finger, and if I'm pointing up at the lift going up on the crane, or if it's a number that I'm trying to tell you, or if it's a body part, there's a different context, you see? So you need to understand the context you're in, and that's how it relates to your new investment criteria, which is based around your goals and lifestyle. So that's what I call as my pre-game warm-up, that I'd recommend no matter where you're at in real estate. Is, you're taking a new sprint. It requires a little pre-game warm-up so you don't pull a muscle. But what that sprint's going to lead you to is another whole view.
Absolutely. Wow. Super great. Loved having you on the show. Tell everyone again, where can we get the book, and where can they find out more about you or connect with you?
Yeah, KenVanLiew.com. We have all kinds of free golden nuggets. There's a new 2021 free outlook that's going to be out in a couple of weeks. But KenVanLiew.com, you can get the book. I believe pay for the shipping. It's for free. There's a 45-minute strategy session if you want to talk to me. You can actually get in touch with me. and we can talk, and I could help you figure out if you were confused like I was getting started and which direction you want to go. That's what I'm here to help pay it forward.
Wow. What a great offer. KenVanLiew.com. Guys, if you need links, social, link to the book, all of that will be on our website, TrueMultifamily.show. Ken, thanks so much for coming on. Really appreciate having you here.
Absolutely, Justin. It's been my pleasure.
Thanks for listening to another episode. Check out our website at TrueMultifamily.show. And if you have an amazing story to tell, share it on our Facebook community, and you might just be the next guest on the show. We're also on all other social networks. Just search True Multifamily. I'm really proud to have the show produced by our company On Air Brands. Check us out at onairbrands.com. We also have an incredible, unique podcasting event that we would love for you to be a part of. Check that out at podmax.co.